Issue 260 Reboot. We started with the heroes asking what those are, as Nicole shows Sonic and Sally footage of dark-armed Gaia monsters threatening a village. And apparently nobody needs to know why they're doing this, because they're the Dark Gaia monsters. Nicole explains to Sonic that they didn't need to help because Gunn and police arrived on time, and no one was seriously hurt. After our time is tediously wasted, Bunny provides an interesting point that those monsters could just be normal poor critters that were changed by the dark energy, rather than simply coming into being for no reason, crawling out the core of the earth because Dark Gaia wanted it that way. Okay, I like that better than the monsters coming from thin air, but that still makes no sense. Why does Dark Gaia want to turn animals into violent monsters like this? What does he have to gain from it? Dark Gaia has no reason to be cynical enough to hate humanity and want it punished because he doesn't know humanity in the first place. Or any people. He's a villain who it's impossible for him to have a motive because of the nature of him. And I'm guessing Sonic's worried he's going to become like those monsters. But we know that wouldn't happen, so there's no reason to care. So Sonic reminds everyone how simple and basic the overall plot of Sonic Unleashed actually is. All they have to do is find the MacGuffins and put them in the right place, like every Zelda game ever. Sally says that finding the emeralds is usually hard, implying that Sonic can't simply go into the special zone in seconds whenever he needs the emeralds, even though this comic is trying to be just like the games. So why did that rule change? Sonic 3 is supposedly canon to the reboot, so why don't people assume they have to look for giant rings to the special zone, and have to look for those instead of emeralds? Now all of a sudden the emeralds stay on Mobius and people need to go look for them there. And Sonic says it's easy because he finds emeralds all the time. And Sally just says the Sky Patrol can't support the weight of his ego, instead of respecting him from experience and having actual faith that someone as fast as him could find the emeralds inevitably by running all over the planet. Though to be fair, the planet's separated into pieces at the moment, so he can't run across the entire thing anymore. And at least going by the size of Earth, if you just ran at the speed of sound, you wouldn't be able to run all across the whole planet in seconds. And he can't run into every building. Sally is just smirking unsympathetically, but that's better than her glaring at Sonic. The whole time, I'm just wondering why Reboot Rotor was too stupid to build a Chaos Energy radar. Archie Rotor had one just fine, so that just makes the Reboot look inferior. There's no justification for them not having a Chaos Emerald detector, which would speed up the pacing of the arc, if they had one Archie with no fanfare, and Rotor's been an inventor for years. So instead of them simply looking at a screen and being able to know the 7 locations to go to in seconds, Sally has to break her team into search teams. That could artificially lengthen the Unleashed adaptation unfairly by the same amount of teams she'll have to do this. More characters just leads to more plots. But hopefully those new stories will be more interesting than Unleashed just focusing on Sonic, who naturally bumbled into every emerald on the way. The heroes finding the emeralds because they have to outright look for them means they'll do stuff to actually earn discovering them, instead of lucking out and finding it without even trying. I'm not even really sure if Sonic did get every emerald from the boss fights. That's how forgettable earning the emeralds in that game was. It's easier to remember how he got the Sun and Moon medals, because they're much more of a focus. Sally tells Sonic to take Amy and Rotor and do Raycon on a possible Gaia temple. And that's the end of her instructions to them. Really? Wow. How did they know where to go? They could have gone to Africa, but they could have gone to another place. I guess they went to one of the 2 confirmed temples that Pickle found. But she didn't even specify which one. So how would she know where Sonic ended up going? And this is all being shown to us after the fact, with Sonic walking along the beach near the ocean, perfectly fine with the ocean. Seriously, what the hell was Sally thinking, slowing Sonic down with Rotor? Sonic would find the Gaia temples a lot faster if he was allowed to simply run everywhere he could, alone. So much for Sally being the brilliant leader. Sonic has no reason to agree to this. In early Archie, he disobeyed Sally's plans every time he thought they were stupid, and he was given a brain so he could think they were stupid. Maybe the reason I used to always imagine Sonic as agreeing to Sally's every order like a slave, and didn't like it, was that I was thinking about the reboot, and what I'd heard about it. Because this is where that criticism applies. In Archie, he actually made a lot of the plans. Sally says that they've hardly met every race and culture out there. This is supposed to hype the audience up for all the world building Flynn's gonna do and try to justify doing the Unleashed plot again. But it's not his world building when he just reuses the locations from a game that he didn't come up with. That's nothing to be proud of, that's cheating. Why should I be interested if they're only going to show locations we saw in Unleashed? That'll be nothing I haven't seen before. Sonic asks why everyone else gets to go on the emerald grabbing missions while he's stuck beachcombing. If the writer thought this was stupid enough to have Sonic ask this question, he shouldn't have written this at all. Sonic even told Sally that he's good at getting the emeralds. How stupid was she to just immediately discard that and go, no, other people can handle it. Let's not send the one most qualified with the most experience. I can't follow her logic at all. Amy is probably his mouthpiece right now as she tells him that if something goes wrong, she and Rotor need Sonic as bodyguard. And that just infuriates me because that's obviously a terrible excuse. Sonic should just run all over the place with his Sonic speed looking for the temple. He's able to do the work of every single search team much faster than them. They're all walking around and he's running at Sonic speed. It's a no-brainer. Apparently she had no brain. And neither did anyone else because nobody objected to it. Amy can use a hammer, and even Rotor has been shown to be able to fight. And if that's not enough, why didn't Rotor make ray guns for them? Even a force field generator for both of them. They don't necessarily need Sonic around as a bodyguard. Why does Sonic care whether he's looking for a temple or the emeralds? You'd think Amy would be too proud to admit that she needs Sonic to protect her and handle everything. Instead, Sonic just says that she's right. Speaking of stupidity, Rotor the so-called genius immediately wants to give up and head back because they haven't seen a temple, which I'm guessing is going to be immediately before they find one. I mean, that'd be the obvious joke. This is John replying. I wasn't told how long they've been slowly walking across the beach with Sonic bored out of his skull. From my perspective, it looks like they've only been here for a minute. Why in the world did Sally think Sonic needed Rotor with him? She could have explained herself. All he's doing is slowing him down. And I immediately remembered that issue that first introduced Bunny, where the reason Rotor didn't slow Sonic down that much is because he gave Rotor roller skates and pulled him along with him while he was running. Of course, even then he slowed Sonic down because his mere presence forced him to have to go to a store to get him that stuff, because they're too stupid to just have it in their base already a long time ago. So that's why Bunny got Cyber Guys, but at least there, they tried to have Rotor being faster than usual. That's another thing that's making the reboot inferior. And there's no reason Rotor shouldn't have roller skates and be pulled by Sonic right now. He could be carrying Amy and pulling Rotor along in skates, and they come over the whole beach a lot faster. If Sally was smart, she'd have made that the plan instead of holding them all back. It's like she forgot Sonic was fast. It's sad to say that Sonic should have made the plan instead. He could do all the searching outside on this piece of the planet by himself and probably be back in time for lunch, depending on how big the piece of the planet is. Rotor says that Pickle wasn't even sure if there would be a temple out here. Well, then why didn't Sally send them to the place where Pickle was certain there'd be a temple? Why in the world wouldn't he be certain of the location of every single temple? Even on our planet, we have 99% of its land surface mapped out by now, with the exception of thick jungles, and that's justified because most people don't want to live there. You'd think Pickle would be able to Google the location of every Gaia temple and find out where they all are in seconds. They'd be tourist traps of every country they're in. This is idiotic. This is meant to be world building, but it's not doing a good job because I don't know which continent they're on, and he clearly hasn't thought through how the world would actually work. There's no reason for any of those temples to be hidden, if their whole purpose is to reform the planet in an extreme emergency. Keeping them hidden is obviously counterproductive to that, which makes the makers and guardians of the temples look like complete idiots. Why don't they all just go public with the knowledge now that it's direly needed? There's no reason to keep the temples a secret. Rotor is certain there's no temple here, as somehow there's no temple on the map of the region. A big building like that isn't on any map. Yeah, fucking right it wouldn't be. People would have to put the building on the map so that people wouldn't walk into it while they have the map in front of them, and if it wasn't on the map, people would plan to build stuff on what they think is vacant land, but it's actually the temple. So this would cause a lot of problems. Rotor's supposed to be smart. That's his only notable personality trait. And apparently Flynn can't even get that right because Rotor's wrong here. You'd think it'd be Amy who'd insist there's no temple here, just to be proven wrong. Sonic's supposed to be the one who's impatient. That's literally in his official character description. So Sonic should be the one assisting that. And even then, he's not that genre blind, so I guess Amy should be the one assisting that. Because she's childish. If there's really no temple, there better be an interesting plot here to make up for the whole scene being padding. But for some reason I have faith in the writing to not be like that. Even though the pacing is already artificially as slow as a snail, because Sonic hasn't instantly found the Gaia Temple. If this was actually Sonic Unleashed, Sonic would go around town and talk to various people, and be told where the temple was, instead of walking on the beach. Well, that's slow-paced and confusingly padded out too. At least Sonic would be accomplishing something every second. He would go have a small conversation with one person, and then speed along to another person. It would be faster than walking on a beach for 5 minutes. You could skip to this point in the story and be better off for it. So the game looked better. Why does it have to be Amy who spots the temple? Both of them have been walking ahead. If they hadn't started arguing, something that easily could have not been written and just feels arbitrary, one of them could spot the temple instead. All Sonic sees are rocks, but Amy can hear and feel something that they can't because she miraculously decided to put her hand on the rock when neither of them did. This feels like a creator's pet moment for Amy. I can't take her seriously, especially with that stupid red dress. So her getting favoritism is always baffling. It's not like she has super speed. She hears music coming from a hole, and I just wonder why the hell only she heard it, and needed to direct their attention to it. Sonic the Hedgehog just like her. You'd think he'd have just as good hearing. She compliments the tune she heard playing, and one of them says it's them, and asks if it's Sonic. Even though she should know that Sonic is a guy, if she knows that Sonic exists. And so she should know that, well, I guess Sonic isn't necessarily a girl or guy's name. But if she knows about Sonic, you'd think that she'd also know what he looks like and therefore that he's a guy, instead of thinking that Amy's voice is masculine. Amy says Sonic's with her, and he says to wait right here because he'll send someone to get her. This is confusing, and Sonic's just as impatient as I am. Amy says they've been waiting maybe 15 minutes and insults his impatience, even though she looks just as impatient. So she's a hypocrite instead of showing a good dynamic with him by being on the same wavelength as him, even one measly time. You might as well Sally here if you're going to write Amy like this. It completely misses the point of Amy as a character. Rotor says that's not a total loss because he beat his top score in Angry Chow, which must have been a reference to Angry Birds, but with poor, cute, and innocent Chow being thrown abuse instead of birds. That doesn't make sense, actually. First Rotor was being the negative one, and now he's the most positive one there? Someone clears their throat and oh god, he looks horrible. Wow, that just immediately shocked me. I'm supposed to believe this is a shark, but no. He can't look like an actual shark because he has to walk around on 2 legs, so just don't even bother having sea creatures try to conform to the Mobian art style for fuck's sake. Sonic the Comic had a shark villain look like a real shark perfectly fine. The stunningly ugly character, an ocean warrior, thinks that they're the surface walkers he's supposed to fetch. Why would he think they could breathe underwater? And he's with a menacing looking Dark Chow. Oh, so are they bad guys? He tells the Chow it's being bad, so I have to wonder if it's adopted and not really his pet originally. Either that or it's an indication of his true evil nature. You'd think they'd all immediately question why he has a Dark Chow and get suspicious of him. Him having a Dark Chow just raises questions instead of keeping things simple. But they don't have any other choice than to trust him because he says he's the guardian of the Gaia Temple. At least I'm meeting a guardian here on a beach after he walks out of the ocean is different and more interesting than Unleashed. But it felt like it took forever. They could have just cut to the characters meeting him. That's how needlessly padded out it was. And you don't call something padded out unless it's boring. So maybe the real problem with the Unleashed adaptation is that it's boring. People wouldn't mind it being long and padded out if it wasn't tedious. There's another idiot moment as Razor doesn't immediately know it has to be Sonic that the priestess wants to see. Even though you think that she'd tell him she wants to see Sonic in particular. He says that the priestess seems to think at least one of them is important, even though Rotor should be seen as just as important to his team. If it was the priestess who talked to Amy, she clearly asked for Sonic. So So obviously she would have told Razor to go get Sonic, and he would remember Sonic's name, and he would know what Sonic looks like. And instead he just gives Sonic a skeptical look as if he doesn't believe what he said. How dumb and ignorant is he? I wasn't even told where they went to. They're on a beach, but I don't remember seeing any text box telling me which country they're in. And this is a world with advanced technology. I don't see why him living in an underwater country would justify him not knowing about Sonic's exploits. That'd be all over the news. They'd have the internet and the media regardless. Razor says he doesn't know about a Gaia temple, even though he knows there's a temple in the shrine. What else would it be called? So, he knows where the temple is. He doesn't know what's necessary for the world to function? The only thing that makes it unique? Since when do normal temples have guardians? He tells them to take air charms and follow him. I hope I'm supposed to assume they got magical spells on them. And even then, I'd better see air bubbles around them to justify them being able to breathe. And he says they don't want to be out here after nightfall. Why would he bother saying this? There's nowhere else they want to go. Wouldn't it be nice if we met the person who created the magical spells to make the air charms work? Rotor and Amy swim after him as he says that he's not even sure those air charms still work. As if the story didn't have enough stupidity overwhelming me and making me want to give up. Why would they ever not work? Why would the capability fade away? Isn't it reckless for him to bring them underwater with air charms he doesn't know work or not? They could breathe in as soon as they go underwater and then find out that the air charms don't work. And of course they don't have bubble shields around them. Of course the artists treat us like idiots. Because this is the same idiot who gave Rouge necklace and expected that to look like a gas mask to us. Well, now I have to pretend that the air bubbles around them are there and are just invisible. He played the games, he should know about the bubble shield. He has no excuse to not tell the artist to draw bubbles around them. Rotor even lampshades this. He says that's weird that he can breathe when he's not in a bubble. If the writer knows it's stupid, why is he writing it anyways? Amy says that her clothes aren't even getting wet, as if it wasn't confusing enough. The writer's like, I know it's stupid, but I'm gonna write it anyways. I can believe in a magical necklace, and even assume that it was infused with chaos energy from an emerald, but still, just calling them charms isn't gonna stop me from finding extremely distracting how confusing it is that they can have these effects around them without being in air bubbles. I can't stand it. The story's expecting only idiots to read it. Who else would find this amazing and entertaining instead of baffling as hell? At least it's creative that the not Atlantis called something other than Atlantis. That also doesn't rip the name off. It's Meropis. But that name sounds stupid and just can't compare to the name Atlantinopolis. I'm probably gonna forget the name. That's how forgettable it is and how much it doesn't register to me. What's Meropis supposed to mean? I've already seen the concept of an underwater city, and that was by Penders. Though we didn't really come up with it, it was inspired by Atlantis anyways. But still, this can't impress me a second time. Also, why even bother making him a shark person if he needs an air bubble around a city anyways? Or is that just a dome of light caused by the light pollution of the city buildings? That'd be less derivative then. Plus, it's not inhabited by echidnas. But is it actually gonna matter what the civilians look like? Of course, I'm glad they're going to an underwater city because it's something original instead of being just like Unleashed. So this is actual world building. That's one. I expected it to be exactly like the game, so that's a pleasant surprise from rock bottom standards. The problem is, he's already made fools out of the main characters, when he's already done this so many times that every new time is unbearable. So the writer's got a lot of work to do if he wants to get me in a good mood again. Already I'm not invested, and the mere mention of the writer tends to be the warning sign of that front. It's a shame the writing up to this point has already made me stop taking the story seriously, because I just know that under normal circumstances, I'd be pretty hyped at them going to a location like this in an Unleashed adaptation. Or at all. Even then, won't it just be a regular city and function? The location doesn't matter if it won't actually use the fact that's underwater for more than just them having to travel to it in the water. At least Penders had the city get threatened with his air bubble running out. So that took advantage of it actually being under the ocean. You couldn't do that with Angel Island. And even Penders did the heroes getting to the underwater city a lot better. He wasn't making me question why the heroes weren't drowning because the air charms didn't keep it simple and give them bubble shields. They just went to the city through a tube system. So all I was left with was nitpicking the fact that they could get into the city-state without having to deal with border control, and have to show passports they don't have now that they'd entered another country. I'm guessing this story will have the same problem though. Why doesn't Sally go to the news or social media and ask where the Gaia temples are? Why doesn't Gunn get informed of the temple's existence and do the same thing? I'm already exhausted and we're not even halfway through the story yet. Razor tells them that the temple's outside the underwater city, when that could have been interesting, and tells them to go in here and up to the surface. What'll be the point if the temple isn't underwater? He was almost there. If we're not going to learn anything interesting about the city besides it being underwater, we didn't really gain much out of it. I naturally assumed that we'd see the heroes go into the city here, but nope, I won't even get that. Sonic hugs the sand, being happy he's not underwater anymore, and a girl shushes him because he might interrupt her again. So is this Shamar? Because there's a building made out of sand here. This isn't very good world building if I wasn't even told the name of the little region they're in. Are they in Apatos? Meropis is just the name of the underwater city, but which country is this beach in? Where is it in relation to every other part of the planet? Is it in Spagonia? I thought I'd at least get this level of information. I'm not as attached to this place because I don't even know which continent it's in. Like, we should see a world map at least. Like Unleashed showed us. So Razor brings them all to his home, with the girl being his little sister. And the heroes see a child go into a cocoon. Can't you just immediately bring them to the Gaia temple? It's kind of an emergency. Why didn't the heroes immediately tell them why they needed to get to the temple? I know boring padding when I see it. I don't know why I'm expected to find this whole home scene wasting my time impressive and charming when it's so obvious that it doesn't need to last longer than 2 seconds. Why are they just standing there and listening to the priestess blab their ears off about a chow, giving them information that everyone already knows and she should know they know? They should just interrupt her. Amy is the one to interrupt her, but logically, she would have interrupted her instantly and she should have just immediately told her why they need her help. But I can at least understand the idiocy this time because it's normal to be polite instead of interrupting. The princess at least justified that she didn't know the land cultures had chow, even though if it's normal to her culture, actually it would have made sense if she assumed it was normal to every culture. But Amy just confuses me when she says that she and her friends didn't know there were settlements under the ocean. Everyone on the planet would know that. That would be common knowledge on Mobius, that there's land cultures and sea cultures. The sea cultures would at least make themselves known for complaining about ocean plastic. And Coral's hat looks ridiculous. Her entire design looks ridiculous. What species is she? She's just distractingly bad. She says that Sonic and his friends were sent by the spirits to help in their time of need. And Razor needed to clear his throat to direct her attention to talking about something that mattered. Okay, so she has a personality. It's idiot. Ditz. I've seen that before. Rotor says he doesn't know anything about the spirits. And Amy's a jackass asshole, elbowing him to interrupt him when he just wants her to confirm if the place is the temple, I assume. Amy's supposed to be his friend, right? She's a pretty shitty friend here. I can imagine I'd be like Rotor in this situation. So Amy's behavior here just offends me. They need to save the world. That's kind of more important than letting priestess blab on. She tells Coral that they'd love to help. Well, at least it's in character for SE1 Amy, to care about little ways of doing good as well as big ways. She cared about saving a little bird and reuniting with its family, while Sonic was dealing with Eggman and Chaos. And the world being shattered doesn't matter that much, aside from the dark Gaia monsters. But that's what the military's for, and the police. Coral then is a weak-willed female character by despairing because the heroes don't know what's going on, and Razor reassures her, and then infuriatingly decides to pad things out even more for us by deciding to camp out for the night and figure things out in the morning. Rotor's supposed to be a genius, he's right there, and you'd think she'd just tell the heroes what's wrong right away if she wants the problem solved so badly. Am I actually supposed to care about the subplot? It didn't need to exist. I can't care when I'm not told what the problem is right away. Right now it looks like it's just artificially dragging out them finding the temple. It's obnoxious. This guy had no reason not to immediately bring the heroes to the temple. And if it's here, it doesn't look like a temple, so I don't care about it. It just looks like a sand house. Razor tells his sister to take the air charms to be recharged, as apparently they need that. Recharged with what? A Chaos Emerald? Did an emerald teleport to the region after the last time Sonic went super? Why aren't the heroes immediately assuming there's an emerald here after hearing that? You'd think the emerald place in the temple would be the first room and the only room. Why don't any of them just take off from where they are and go look for the temple? Amy talks on Rotor's handheld device, informing someone of what's happened. Oh, Sally. This was a waste of time. Amy says that since no one knows what a guided temple is, well, that's the kind of temple that would need everyone to know what it is the most. Rotor's going to run tests on the structure here in the morning. Why not right now? He doesn't have anything else to do, does he? What an idiot. It would be his second. I can't imagine why the people would stop him. Amy then tells Sally that Sonic's really hard to read sometimes, and Sally agrees, as they're both equally incompatible with Sonic. How could the writer write an article on why Sonic and Amy are perfect for each other and they're so much like each other, when he thought to write stuff like this? If anything, this is anti-Son Amy. Sally tells Amy that they're going to stop the Sky Patrol soon and proceed the rest of the way to the Emerald stealthily because she doesn't want Eggman to know they're closing in on Emerald. Again, they'd have already closed in on it by now if they just sent Sonic after it. This kind of painfully slow-paced temple-finding mission would suit anyone but Sonic. Sally hopes they'll be safe, and Amy wishes Sally luck as I feel like the story is moving along agonizingly slowly. Maybe that's just proof that the story's boring me. Because if it was really that interesting, I wouldn't mind it taking a while. The priestess tells Amy in a fetal position that she can't sleep because she's never overseen a child get reincarnated herself. Why would Flynn make child reincarnation take a super long time when it wasn't like that in the game, when the only thing this change adds is padding? And she's stupid enough to think she'll be able to mess this up. How could she mess up something that a child does on its own? Has she never taken care of a baby Chow before? Wouldn't be exactly like taking care of a normal Chow? Why change that too? And she wipes away a tear because she's still a crybaby. This is taking forever. Amy's nicer at least. But she's an idiot too here because she somehow doesn't know a thing about Chow raising. It's not exactly hard. At least makes me smile seeing Coral get confused because Amy's friends with people named Cream and Tails. I'm left to assume that this country doesn't have any sort of access to the internet and the media outside. She's living on the surface, not underwater. Why should she be so cut off from the outside world? This is a world with robots in it. She'd know who Tails is from the news. I wasn't told how far away this region is from Knothole. Amy compliments Coral on the flute song she played earlier. While it is good to have Amy be like this whole scene with her is really dragging on with no plot progression. I like that she said she played the Mystic Melody. It's a technique handed down from one priestess to the next, and it seems like it's the only thing she's doing right lately. Her words, not mine. Even the writer knows she's incompetent. There's no reason Knuckles and SE2 would have been able to get and learn the Mystic Melody if it was only played in an isolated culture in a place like this. So what's the point if it doesn't make the Mystic Melody in the game make sense? It does make a lot more sense that someone would learn the Mystic Melody from a person who knows how to play it than learn it from stepping into some arbitrary green circle. But it's not really the Mystic Melody, as you'll see. You'd think the sea creature people would be living underwater 24/7 in that underwater city, not in a sand building. But I guess that'd be keeping it too simple for them. So they live above water instead and make things more confusing, making their awful designs not worth it because they don't even need to be sea creatures. Why does Amy assume that her flute was magical anyways? She explains that the Mystic Melody activates magic rings to, no, not teleport people like portals like in the game. That'd be keeping it simple. Instead, it activates magic rings to power the city, because they need activation for no reason. Sustains the watery shield that protects everyone from harm. Why is it watery? That's the least effective shield material ever. And why would it protect anybody from harm? It's not solid, it's water. Why would the watery shield need the Mystic Melody to sustain it instead of it just sustaining itself? Even Pender's made more sense than this. It made sense that the Chaos Emeralds were powering the air bubble around Atlantinopolis. It was just a reinterpretation of the basic idea from Angel Island that a magical gem needs to be there to keep the island's unique gimmick around. So he just changed the unique gimmick. Why can't it just be kept simple and be a literal force field? It seems like the only original thing about the Mystic Melody that I like is that it lets you commune with the ancient spirits. I mean, if they're ancient, it makes no sense that they'd understand modern languages. But the language of wordless music could keep the same meaning throughout the generations. Okay, but if she's in regular contact with these spirits, what's the spirit's excuse for not even bothering to learn their language? Why doesn't she just give the spirits English lessons? Not to mention, Ticole and Chip speak English just fine. Maybe what she means is that the melody creates a portal to the spirits' home planet and summons them to her. But that's not what commune means. It means communicate in an otherworldly way, doesn't it? Chip doesn't need a song to be communed with. So did a wizard cast a spell to make a song arbitrarily be magical all by itself? A song is a specific combination of musical notes of a certain speed and length. That's a complicated and very particular thing to be charmed as magical. Way more complex than simply making an object magical. You'd have to get the song exactly right for it to work. But at least with a song anyone could play with the right instrument knowledge, you couldn't lose the song, like you could lose a magical pendant. Amy continues wasting my time telling Coral that she's seen plenty of crazier things than spirits. And it's by this point that I wonder if Coral is a creator's pet. Because if she's not overly favoritized by the writer himself, why else would he have the motivation to have Amy take forever having as long a conversation with her as possible and bore the audience, who has no reason to be interested and impressed by her? Well, it might be because Amy's favoritized, so she gets to have a long scene where she looks like a nice, considerate person. Because Coral is clearly miserable here, and that doesn't come off as favoritism. Amy pities her and thinks that Coral reminds her of her when she was younger, and always relied on Sonic to save her. There's no excuse for the plot coming to a screeching halt for so long with this boring conversation that led to nothing. I thought it at least build up to the plot progressing, but no. It could have been cut out of the story, no problem. The next morning, someone says that the building's definitely bigger on the inside, and yet he can't see anything that screams, "Stick Chaos Emerald here." He didn't have to write that it was bigger on the inside. This could have made sense in Archie, where there were a million different Chaos Emeralds. I would have assumed that an emerald made this possible. I guess if they could have air charms, they could have bigger on the inside charms too. But still, we should have been told how they recharged the air charms. Rotor's supposed to be a scientific genius, and he's completely nonchalant about this place being bigger on the inside than outside. Who cares that it breaks physics, right? He says that it looks like the stone is old enough to be a Gaia temple, but that doesn't prove it is. Well, that's smart at least. But still, why doesn't the panel immediately tell us who is talking in that left text bubble? Or show us? It turns out to be Sonic. Rotor says that Coral said this temple wasn't built by their people, and Rotor guesses that it was originally on the surface, but fell down here. Down here? How? I thought they were on the surface because they're above water, and Razor clearly told them they'd go up until they reached the surface. And they're not swimming. This is the surface. Another needlessly confusing line that didn't need to be shown. They would have had this conversation earlier. And as if we didn't have enough confusing idiot moments, Razor thinks Amy's saying that Cream's chow are made of cheese and chocolate. No one would think this. And it's at least explained why chow is called Crusher. It makes him feel important, at least in Razor's mind. Razor's just an idiot. The only reason I care about him is that he put his hand on someone's shoulder to reassure them and cares about his little sister. How would that translate to his child becoming a Dark Chow? He does remember how Chow become Dark Chow, right? I guess it makes more sense for it to become a Dark Chow because their owner is bitter and cynical. Because evil is kind of hard to quantify. It's pretty subjective. So Razor's cynical. I guess that explains why he was skeptical of Sonic. It would have made sense if he was just a villain instead. And apparently I needed even more characters confusing the hell out of me, because this girl's enough of an idiot to think Chow are creepy, when even Amy has to remind her that she knows these Chow better than her. This isn't funny. It makes me feel sorry for her. What's with all the morons? So we've got Coral, who's just an insecure moron, and now we've got Pearly, who's just a cowardly moron. And Razor is a moron too. I want a different character type for once. Why all the focus on Amy? She can swing a hammer, so what? Someone else could do that. Why not Rotor or Sonic, who's supposed to be the actual main character? Amy's not contributing anything with the way she's interacting with them all that only she could contribute and not Sonic or Rotor. Also, Razor says that Amy's hair is covered in spines and so the Chow would be afraid of her, when her hair clearly looks just like normal hair. So again, he said something stupid and just confused me. And it just makes it obvious that he should have been talking to Sonic, and so Amy shouldn't be in this position. Then someone screams, so finally the plot's gotten exciting. Finally we got actual plot progression again. We could have had this panel a lot earlier, like the second they went into Razor's house. She screams, and out of complete nowhere, Razor is an idiot again by grabbing Sonic's arm and asking what he did to her, even though when he first met Sonic, he clearly told him that he was a hero. And obviously if he did something wrong to her, she wouldn't be close to him and would have been running away from him. What a moron. Why is he part of the story? Why are any of these idiots a part of the story for so long? They're so unrelatably stupid that I can't understand why the story has a focus on them. They've revoked their right to that. This is why I can't take Flynn's writing seriously anymore. I notice all the stupidity by the Iron Dominion saga, and he still hasn't changed. Sonic cathartically says that he was just trying to figure out what was wrong, and Rotor grabs Razor by the arms, as I start to doubt that she was screaming because the Chow died instead of reincarnated. Apparently that'd be too dark for the guy who roboticized Sally. She says in a panic that the Chow hasn't hatched, and should be reincarnated by now. I thought that way earlier than this. The Chow dying instead would have been keeping it simple because it would have been predictable, but made sense. This is never gonna make sense. I like that she's named after an astrological sign, but will have any significance at all? This plot point better have a good explanation, because it just seems like arbitrary drama out of nowhere to force the plot to last longer. My guess at some point was that the Chow had been kidnapped, and that was why she panicked. But no, that'd be more grounded in reality and keep things simple. Amy then tells Sonic and Razor that she could really use them out here because they've got company. And a weird looking eye patch character who looks weird in the middle asks who they are, and is antagonistic to them for trespassing on sacred ground. Why didn't the priest just contact him yesterday and tell him that the people the spirits wanted to be here showed up? This could have easily been avoided. I see a bunch of people with helmets and gold trident thingies or whatever, as if they're supposed to be actual authority figures, who are gonna frustrate me by antagonizing the heroes like lawful stupid villains. The worst kind of villains possible. I guess he didn't learn much from the Council of Acorns backlash. If this guy was a Chow kidnapper who wanted to sell Aquarius to someone for a lot of money because the Chow belonged to a famous priestess, maybe then it'd make a bit more sense. The Chow could be kidnapped and then held for ransom. Instead, his team is supposed to be good guys, so there's no excuse for them hating the heroes and not already being informed on who they are. Coral should tell him who they are and resolve this potential conflict right away in the next issue, because he'd be like, wow, you're Sonic? So this shouldn't be a cliffhanger causer. I say cliffhangers, apparently the story ended here. Finally. Because for the first time ever, the reboot's gonna have 2 stories in 1 issue. Well, so much for more plot progression for the story to try to make up for the slow pacing. Instead I'll get distracted by some other story. But at least I'll have hope for it because it's a new story, not one that completely lost my respect by the beginning. It's so weird that it took until now for there to be 2 stories per issue. That's not Archie Sonic. In the next story, Sally tells her friends to rise and shine to look for an emerald, and we see Antoine realistically yawning and Cream offering her friends tea, showing her polite personality. And I just remembered how underutilized she is in the action in the reboot. At least it makes sense that someone polite and docile would act as a servant girl to them. But why is Big the cat here? Shouldn't he want to be fishing? They already have Bunny. I guess it can't hurt to have 2 people with super strength here, in case he gets surrounded in a fight, even if it makes Bunny redundant. But the Sky Patrol is above ground. Bunny can fly to fight robots, but there's no way Big could be useful. Bunny's surprised that Sally apparently tracked down Emerald already, and she hopes that Sally got sleep last night. And wait, the script for the story is by someone other than Flynn? It's by Alette Baker. I can't pronounce that first name, but okay. The story might actually be good. There's no excuse for it being bad now. Antoine says, exactly my point. I don't know why he said only one word of French. I know for a fact that French speakers who've known English for most of their lives do not talk like this. And I'm still waiting to be told how the hell Sally tracked that emerald down. It's kind of the whole premise of the story. Sally says that according to the Eggnet file she took from the Death Egg, Eggman had several operations looking into powerful resources to fuel his empire. And a lot of them were apparently duds, somehow. Can I get elaboration on that? No? Because that sounds really interesting. Guess not. Why would they ever be duds? Why would Eggman ever be lacking in fuel? The world has more ways of generating energy than it knows what to do with. We can generate electricity from rainfall now. People invented hydrogen cell batteries that can fuel a house for 3 days. Eggman wouldn't need to go find resources to fuel his empire. She could have simply said magical artifacts, not resources. And if she means Chaos Emeralds, how would any of them be duds? It's not like the heroes made a ton of fake emeralds and hid them everywhere. They'd have a Chaos Radar. If they didn't have a Chaos Radar, they wouldn't start looking into a powerful resource to fuel his empire, because he wouldn't have a reason to think that there's an emerald there. Then Sally says that the excavation was stalled. But why? Why aren't we being told why? Well, I've lost hope. The holes in the information I'm being given are more interesting than the slow-paced story I've got. Tails asks how they know that the excavation didn't get started up again. And at least the writer thinks to have Tails say that the files might be out of date by now. But I'd like to be told how long it's been since Sally got the files as a nice reminder. With all the recap this comic has, that'd be actually useful. I guess it's been a day. Sally said earlier that she'd contact her friends abroad to look for the emeralds. I would have preferred if I saw her contact them, at least for a panel. Instead, the chronology is going to be kind of confusing, because that panel is foreshadowing a story arc. So it has to be before that story arc, but we don't see her contacting those friends abroad in this issue. And she leaves for a mission after this, so she couldn't have contacted them in the issues after this. Nicole says that the hiatus in the excavation was reported just before the world shattered, and with the Egg Army in disarray, it wasn't a priority. Looking for an emerald wasn't a priority anymore? Why would the army be recruited to try to dig up an emerald? Won't that be left to digging robots? Or digging Mobians? What would the Egg Army having to fight monsters have to do with this? You'd think that the Eggnet would have information on exactly why the excavation was stopped. Nicole says that she's been scanning transmissions, and it sounds like they're planning on resuming quite soon. Considering what I just said, why didn't they resume already if they're planning on it? Why did they even stop at all? How did they not find the emerald already? Way to go. All the story had to do was establish that the heroes found out about the emerald's location first, and their head start would justify Eggman not having it. But not even that simple standard was met. I went into this with one expectation that I took for granted and couldn't even get that met. I could understand if we were clearly told that the Dark Eye aliens were attacking the people excavating. Even then, they'd have no reason to do so. This is why robots are better to use in stories. This is why he never should have used those monsters at all. Flynn would have been taking advantage of Eggman as a villain a lot more if he used robots instead of monsters. He was taking advantage of as a villain a lot more in early Archie, where he had like multiple different plans and issues sometimes. Though I'm not complaining about a lack of focus on Eggman, when I don't exactly like Archie Eggman. Bunny looks forward to the idea of Eggman wasting his time digging around looking for an emerald that isn't there after they grab it without being noticed. I guess I just have to assume that most of the time, the heroes succeed at sneaking into places without being spotted on missions. Because otherwise, you'd think they'd be genre savvy enough by now to never assume that things could be this easy and simple. Why would Sally, who's normally so cautious that she's paranoid, just take it for granted that they'd be able to sneak in and sneak out? Actually, this could have a chance of working, if she had the common sense to send Sonic instead. Sonic can move at Sonic speed. He'd just run over to the emerald, pick it up, and run away. I guess the robots would see a blue blur running past them and record it in their memory and tell people about it. Never mind. I guess I was imagining him running past them and sneaking past them when they're not in the same room as them. Because she assumes the mission will be really quick and easy, she tells all the especially useful people to stay here, while she, Antoine, and Tails will go on the mission instead. I guess because it's a low-risk mission. Why not Cream? If she thinks this mission will be super easy, and so she doesn't need Bunny to be her bodyguard, throwing caution to the wind, and Cream is a heroine in training who needs all the training she can get, then why doesn't she ask Cream to come along? There isn't any danger. Just sneak in and sneak out. Having Cream as a supposed freedom fighter isn't fooling me into thinking it's like great fan service because she's not acting as a freedom fighter anyways. So at that point it'd be better to just have her in the position she was at in Archie. Like before the Team Freedom thing. Why doesn't she just send Tails there with Omochao supervising in case he gets kidnapped? Tails is known for being a fast flyer. He could just fly over to the Emerald and dig it up really quickly and then fly away. After it's made sure that no one would find out about it. You'll know what I mean later. What could she possibly think anyone extra on the mission would contribute? They're just slowing Tails down. Even I'm coming up with better plans than her. I guess they plan on using a drilling machine to dig it up. I mean, I don't see any shovels in their hands. Antoine says there's no security right as they walk up to a closed door with Eggman's face on it in front of a stone wall. And the door is at least some security. Sally brings Nicole to the door. See, why couldn't Tails have done that without her? He could have carried Nicole to the door after flying to it really quickly. Nicole, who is overpowered in Archie, is balanced here as the system's defenses are so capable that they'll overcome her hacking alterations in 72 minutes, I guess with machine learning algorithms, or AI, after she shut down all the robots and masked all the outgoing video feeds and transmissions. Why would she be able to shut down the robots? Why would all the robots anywhere be all linked to one network that could be hacked? I would never assume that. That's needlessly convenient. I'd assume every robot was its own entity. I'm sure the heroes could just smash the robots to death in one hit, just like they always do, but they're trying to sneak in. And at least this is faster paced than a boring, overly long, generic action scene. If the robots all die in one hit, that's barely an action scene. Nicole tells them that she'll keep track of their time, and says the lights have been turned on and she's going to disengage the locked doors now. Why wasn't there just a normal lock on the door, with a key nowhere for them to find? Eggman's over-reliance on technology just made things worse. Antoine's annoying me, but at least his only personality was kept intact here, instead of him not having a personality. But he better do something. It does make sense that since there have been earthquakes earlier in the reboot, he'd worried that the tunnel they're in might collapse as a result of being weakened by them. Antoine justifies that the supports look sturdy. At least this dialogue isn't a complete waste of time because it tries to have the plot make more sense by filling in a plot hole. Antoine wonders why the excavation was stopped, being smart enough to think of possible answers. The heroes don't want to leave the remains of robots behind, or get rid of any robots, because that'd make it obvious they're in here. Like, the heroes snuck past robots all the time inside EM, and they didn't exactly shut them all down remotely. If they did, there would be no tension whatsoever when it came to sneaking past them, so SADM is better here. If it weren't for Antoine talking, the story would just be the characters walking ahead. And since nothing's happening, I'm bored. At least in the story where Sally met Jeffrey, the pacing felt much faster because Sally wasn't talking to anyone most of the time, and just progressed multiple panels without dialogue. So it felt like she was moving a lot faster. The lack of dialogue bored me, but at least she was constantly doing something new, so the plot felt like it was progressing, not lingering on an overly long fight scene. The lack of dialogue bored me, but now I know that having dialogue could be even more boring. They reach a closed door in a tunnel with minecart tracks, and Sally assumes this is where the digging stopped, and Nicole explains that the logs here indicate an abrupt change in the composition of the terrain, and yet there's nothing dangerous in the air. What change? No, that's not important. Nicole says she's detecting faint readings of chaos energy. Wait, she's got a chaos emerald radar? Since when? So at that point, there's no excuse for the heroes not having a much better radar like an Archie, instead of a lame dinky one that only activates when they're right in front of the emerald, which is supposed to be the explanation for why they don't just know where all the emeralds are already. They've been freedom fighters for years. And oh, for fuck's sake, the story ends without us learning why the heroes were all apprehensive at the door being opened. All the robots are shut down, why the fuck would they be worried? If they're not worried, then why do they have these expressions? We didn't need the backup story to end on a cliffhanger too. Is the reboot that desperate for engaged readers? It finally did what Sonic the Comic did, and tried to have 2 story arcs per issue so that you'd be more likely to be interested in an issue. That worked in SCC because the writing was good, so I ended up with multiple great story arcs. I don't think it works as well if you don't enjoy either arc, because then you're just like, why is the pacing being dragged down in both arcs? This issue is by Ian Flynn, the first story anyways. The first story, surprisingly, was about Sonic, Amy, and Rotor being greeted by and following an original character who can walk out of the ocean, and our time being wasted for way too long in a sandy house, which is confusingly above the water when he's a sea creature who showed us an underwater city. No, that'd be too interesting. Penders already did that. It was nothing but padding. There's no excuse for, 1, the people not knowing that it's a guide temple and what its vital function is, or if it isn't, there's really no excuse for them being here. And 2, Sonic not running everywhere he could alone. That's what would happen if Sally actually thought to take advantage of his super speed, instead of having to be slowed down having to walk with his friends at the start because they can't run fast like he can. He could have made rounds around the whole continent first, and then they'd look for anything he missed. Sally immediately broke my suspension of disbelief for the whole story because we weren't told that she told Sonic to run around everywhere. So I just wondered why the hell Sonic was walking with people when trying to reach a destination. The plot didn't need to go that slowly. They could just instantly get greeted by Razor on the beach instead of all those panels being wasted. They're wasted because they're boring. Amy, as opposed to anyone else, heard the mystic melody and thought to talk to the priestess playing it, who would send a guide out to them, bring them to where they actually need to go. Sonic would have run past it without getting to her at all. I want to compliment the story on having an original setting from Unleashed, when I thought the arc would entirely imitate the game. They didn't have to have a Sea People Sandtown where a lot of Chow live in. But the problem is, while I might appreciate this if the writing was good, basically no plot progression happened after the heroes got there. It was just a bunch of painfully boring wastes of my time. There's nothing endearing about it at all so far, because all the characters there are just idiots to the point where I'm worried about them. So that was a disappointment. I've already seen Chow before, and I've read Sonic Legacy, so I've already seen an awful looking sea creature Mobian before. The story ends with the authority figures being confusing, unlikable idiots to the heroes instead of knowing them already from them fighting Eggman after a Chow freaks Coral out. That's too arbitrary for me to take seriously. It's better to have a pure evil villain than an unlikable villain like this. The story not by Ian Flynn, by Alab Baker, was a boring, slow-paced story that didn't need all that dialogue if it wasn't going to bother explaining the plot holes that are more interesting than the story itself. If the story consisted of the sequel to the story, and it was all in one issue, then the plot holes might have actually been filled, and so I wouldn't even be complaining about this. Why did the Eggman side stop digging for a Chaos Emerald? Nicole hacks so that all the robots are stopped so the heroes can sneak into a tunnel to look for an emerald. And they can't believe what they're seeing at the end. That's it. That's all the plot. Most of the story was just dialogue. When the story just ends there, right when it could have gotten interesting, that sucks. I'd rather a story take up a whole issue and just end in one issue at that point. It feels like it's just multiple GIMP stories. Neither stories are that great, but this is definitely the better one. It's at least potentially respectable.